And now let's start the action with round number one.
Okay, folks, welcome back to round number one of Combat Sports Live. Ladies and gentlemen, round number one is brought to you by Abington Auto Auction. All you pre-owned and used car managers, folks that are in the car business that purchase vehicles at the auctions, you definitely want to check them out. Abington Auto Auction has got some of the best prices for you folks in the car business that purchase vehicles. So if you need vehicles to purchase, you can get the best prices at Abington Auto Auction. You can check them out online at abingtonautoauction.com. Charles, this week we've got a matchup and the return of what two people would consider the legends of the sport. My question is, when you have a fight like this, you got a guy like Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell that were supposed to face off against each other. A lot of people were looking forward to that matchup. It got squashed because of Tito's
injury.
His back injury.
Again, another one.
Injury.
Multiple issues kind of popped up with Tito all at once, and it kind of eliminated him from that fight. But my question would be, a fight like this, when you got a guy like Chuck Liddell and Rich Franklin that are fighting at a catch weight. They're not in the hunt for any kind of title shot or anything like that. I mean, is a fight like that, is it going to have the intrigue that is necessary to carry a fight card and carry the numbers of pay-per-view buys that the UFC wants to see?
Well, I think for the dedicated, diehard UFC mixed martial arts fan, I think it really does, because these guys have been household names for a very long time. As UFC got more organized with rules and weight classes and all the things that they did to kind of clean the sport up, Chuck Liddell's been a household name. Rich Franklin has been an incredible fighter. I, like Caleb, I've always been a fan of Rich Franklin because he just comes to battle, and he lost a couple fights to a superstar, and it seemed like everybody wanted to kind of write him off. And I just think that he's going to bring a good fight to Chuck Liddell. I think Chuck Liddell's skills have probably eroded faster than Rich Franklin's with their time off just because of age. That 40-plus clock starts to kick him. Believe me, I know. I just celebrated my 41st birthday. That body doesn't wake up and recover. For whatever level you train, and
certainly Rich Franklin has been the busier fighter.
Absolutely, and I think Rich Franklin's going to win the fight. That's more again me picking on heart and wanting on heart, but Rich Franklin's the real deal, man.
Well, for once, and it's a very rare occasion, me and Charles actually agree on our picks for this fight. For this is a no-brainer. Even though Chuck Liddell, I'm a fan of Chuck Liddell. I've never been as big of a fan as I would say the rest of the world. You mentioned UFC to the casual observer, Caleb, wouldn't you say?
That is something that I was wondering about. Is to the casual fan, Chuck and Tito are about the biggest names in the sport.
Still
Brock Lesnar, yes, exactly. Still, those are just the names people know. They probably still figure those guys are champions. For the lesser educated fans. So I would honestly say that the UFC took a hit in their pay-per-view buys, even though I would say Chuck Liddell versus Rich Franklin is a far better, more competitive matchup.
For guys like us that are more interested in seeing
a good fight. Exactly. But for the people that buy the names, yeah, it's going to hurt their pay-per-views a little bit.
And it's unfortunate for Chuck because, for a guy like that who is not willing and not ready to let the sport go,
right,
and has gone 1-4 in his last 5 fights, it was a gift. It was a, here you go.
Here's another win.
Here's another win. Yes. Because, at the end of the day, a Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz is always going to go the same way unless Chuck falls down and bumps his head on the cage before he gets in there. Tito's elementary stand-up skills is never going to be able to penetrate Chuck's superior stand-up skills, and
Liddell has too good of a sprawl for Tito to take him down.
Exactly.
Anything can happen in a fight, but on paper, Tito just can't win that fight.
And now you enter Rich Franklin, who by far is a huge upgrade in competition. Chuck's going to have to bring his game. He doesn't have that aura that he had during his championship reign. Kind of like I kind of compare it to Mike Tyson. Guys got in the ring and they were scared to bang with him already.
Right.
Not anymore, though.
Not anymore, no. Yeah, he lost that.
Yeah.
And now you've got guys who have figured out and looked at the blueprint on how to beat him. And I'm sure Rich is going to do his work.
And we've talked about this in the past, and I've analyze. I kind of tend to overanalyze MMA and the history of the sport. I think me and Caleb have talked a few times about my theory of the Generation 1, Generation 2, Generation 3.
Exactly.
And now we're going into Generation 4 fighters. And these two guys, I would say, are firmly set in Generation 2.
Right.
But I think that Rich Franklin has he's evolved more.
A far more diverse game. I think he's not nearly as... Not that Chuck's one-dimensional. He's definitely good at more than one thing, but I would say that Rich Franklin has a lot more ways that he's got a realistic chance of winning this fight than Chuck Liddell does.
Yeah, I think he's going to have more doors of opportunity.
Exactly.
Because he's going to have more weapons that are at his disposal that he can utilize. I think that I don't think he takes Chuck down in the first round, but I think in the middle of the second round, Chuck's going to gas. And Rich Franklin has got some vicious Muay Thai kicks.
And make no mistake, Rich Franklin has more power than most people in the division. He's got a ridiculous amount of punching power. He touches you, it hurts. Except for Anderson Silva is the only guy he's been able to crack and hasn't dropped.
And that's got to be difficult. And I personally like. There's some fighters that I'm a fan of because I'm a fan of their fighting style.
Exactly, I agree.
But personally, I'm kind of like, whatever. Rich Franklin's the kind of guy that you could kind of see yourself hanging out with. He's a nice guy.
What's not to like? He's a great guy. Inside and out of the ring.
Humble and respectful.
Yeah, super talented. Puts in the work, and then after the fight or before the fight, you're not listening to all this chatter.
Yes.
He's a respectful human being.
Definitely a worker.
Why wouldn't you want to see a guy like that win and do well?
And it's got to be tough for him, who pretty much at the 185-pound weight division for years. Could beat anybody, and then along comes Anderson Silva.
Still could beat anybody but Anderson, in my opinion.
And that's got to be a difficult thing, not for just himself, but the UFC, who built him up over the years.
Yes.
Because Rich Franklin was the poster boy for a long time for the sport, and he led the charge into bringing it into the mainstream, in my opinion.
Legitimizing it, yes.
And then Anderson Silva comes along, and he's can beat everybody in the world except for that one guy.
Yeah.
It's not a bad place to be. I'd take that if
if number 2 in the world's not bad.
Number 2 in the world's not bad, and who knows? When Anderson, his energy, he slows down a step. He obviously, I don't think he's preparing and paying as much attention as maybe he once did. He kind of has made a spectacle and a joke of some of his last fights, and I understand the talent wasn't there, but maybe Rich Franklin gets a shot at him a little bit later on, and
maybe even at 205,
and avenges both of those losses with a big knockout.
Well, I think it'd be very interesting to see, because I think it's an inevitability for Anderson Silva to be making the move to 205 to fight the bigger guys, and I think that Rich Franklin should stick around to 185 and see what happens. But we're going to be talking about this fight and others. Also, in round number 2, we're going to be talking about Pat Barry versus Mirko Cro Cop, a newcomer versus a legend, and we will have the privilege of talking with Pat Barry directly from Vancouver about this and other things. So, folks, stick around for round number 2 of Combat Sports Live.